But the question comes up, what does a good dad look like? And as I was researching and doing some background stuff on being a dad, I actually found a website that promises that in 15 questions, they will scale you and rate you on being a great dad to being a terrible dad. I did not have the self-esteem that could handle that kind of test, so I did not take the test. Because no dad goes in it saying, I want to be a terrible dad. I want to be an absentee dad. I want to be the workaholic dad. I want to be the dad who bails, who quits. I want to be the dad who my kids are afraid of. We all go in it wanting to be the good dad, the dad you see in the movies kind of dad who's like the perfect dad. But I can promise you, if you are a dad for any amount of time, at some point along the way, you'll look in the mirror, you'll look at your kids, and you'll think, I'm a failure. And if you have raised your kids, and if they are out of the house, and you say, that's not me, I will say, number one, you're either a liar, or number two, you are just totally ignorant to the surroundings around you. Because there's moments happen where you just feel like you're a failure. I had taken three of my kids out at one point. My oldest at that point was about 9. My youngest was 4. So my son and 2 daughters, 9, 7, and 4. I took them out to play soccer at a park, and we started close by, and I'd kick the ball to them. They'd trap it and kick it back. My 9-year-old, my 7-year-old, I could put a little bit behind it. They could handle that. My 4-year-old, I just tap it, and usually it didn't even reach her. She just put her foot on top of the ball and would kick it back. She was the one who was much better at picking flowers than playing soccer. So I tried to set her up for the win. Yay, nice stop. And every time they'd trap, they'd step back 5 yards. So we're now at like 35, 40 yards, and I could put something behind it. My 9-year-old could trap it and send it most of the way back. My 7-year-old, I could kick it to her, put something behind it. She could trap it, send it back. My 4-year-old, like I said, most of the time I kicked it to her, but it didn't even reach her. And then she'd kick it, and I'd have to go get it, So the last one, though, 35, 40 yards out, I had to put a little something behind it so it'd reach her. And for some reason, when I kicked it, it got air. And it lifted off the ground about a perfect 3 feet high line drive. And to make matters worse, because none of the others had reached her, her first step was to run toward me and toward the ball. And it was like the terrorizing scene in a slow-motion movie. No! The ball's going toward her, and her little sunflower dress, she's running toward the ball, all excited, and it catches her square in the face. Takes her feet out from under her. She's laying on the ground. I'm already running towards her because you know what's going to happen. And when I get to her and I pick her up, she just clings to me. And she says, I'm sorry, Daddy. And I'm like, no, I'm sorry. And there goes the Father of the Year award. Sometimes it just feels like you're going to be a failure, and then sometimes you just get to have those fun dad moments. So my youngest, who's now 17, he was 16 at the time, he had told me, Dad, I'm taking you clothes shopping. It's time to end the dad clothes. Okay, I'm taking you out. I'm taking you to the stores I pick, and you're going to get what I wear. I had permission to say no to something, but I could not say yes to anything that was going to be bought. So we're looking at different clothes at more of the stores where he would shop than where I would shop. And he comes to me with clothes, and he's like, no, put the plaid pants back. You're not wearing those, and put them back. You have to understand, when Dominic and I go out, he usually assumes the dad role. I assume the kid role. So he gives me some clothes. He's like, go try these on, and I try them on. And he gave me a sweater. This is so fun. He gave me a sweater that was too small, like obviously too small. Did I let it go? No. I put the sweater on, and I come out of the fitting room, and he turns and looks, and at first his eyes were big, and then it went straight to laser. Get back in there. You're not wearing that. I said get in. Don't talk to me. Get in there and change the sweater. He was not even going to have, so I'm walking around the store. Dad, get in there. No, you're not wearing this. Why are you doing this to me? 1, 2. I change clothes. We get to the car. It's silent. He goes, we're never doing this again. Sometimes, dads, you just have to because you can. It's a fun moment. So we're going to continue today on what does it look like to be a godly dad. And this is not an end-all cure. I wish I could tell you, follow these 3 things or these 4 things and your kids will turn out perfect. It doesn't work that way. But Solomon gave us wisdom on what it is to be a godly dad. And the cool thing about this, what I want you to keep in mind, is this is Solomon writing to his son. It's Proverbs chapter 4, page 451 in the Bibles and the seatbacks. This is Solomon writing to his son, but remember this too. Solomon is writing with his dad being David, King David. And if you have any kind of history with the Bible, you know King David is a major player in the history not only of Israel, in prophetic history, but even in the lineage of Jesus. So when Solomon writes, he writes from this place of having a king, a godly king as his dad, but he's also writing to a heritage that's the lineage of Christ. So we'll be looking at that in a moment. But before we do, we want to go to our key scripture for this entire series, The Proverbial Life, because everything we do, whether it be finances or relationships or being a godly mom or a dad, man or woman, it all comes from the same heart if we're going to do it right. And that's in Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5 and 6. It'll be up on the screens. Let's start with the address. For those of you in the Lakeside room and the family room, thank you for joining us. If you're watching online, let's all read this out loud together. Let's start with the address. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight. That's our guideline throughout the series. So for Father's Day, what is it that Solomon wanted his kids to know? And we're going to use this passage as our primary outline for today. We'll be reading portions of the passage that line up with the parts of the outline. So here's our first point that we're going to look at with Proverbs 4 beginning at verse 1. And here's the point. Learn from the past and repeat what is good. Learn from the past and repeat what is good. Eat the meat, spit out the bones. Proverbs chapter 4 beginning at verse 1. Solomon writes, "Listen, my sons, to a father's instruction. Pay attention and gain understanding. I give you sound learning, so do not forsake my teaching. For I too was a son to my father, still tender and cherished by my mother. Then he taught me, and he said to me, take hold of my words with all your heart. Keep my commands, and you will live. Get wisdom, get understanding. Do not forget my words or turn away from them. Do not forsake wisdom, and she will protect you. Love her, and she will watch over you. Learn from the past, repeat what is good." So Solomon starts writing his sons, and he starts by referring to his dad. And you're saying, this is David. He's a Bible guy. How bad can a guy be who was in the Bible? Oh, David had his low points. David wanted to build a temple for God to reside in that place where people could meet with the presence of God on earth. And God's response to David was, you can't be the one to build this. You've killed too many people. Not exactly your go-to trait as a godly man. David, one time when all of his soldiers were off to war, and he should have been too, he's hanging out on his house. He goes up on his rooftop, and the rooftops back then were kind of like a patio. It was a flat area. He's looking over his kingdom, and looking in one of the windows, he sees a lady named Bathsheba, and she's taking a bath. And he says, I want that. He sends some of his men to go get her, and the Bible doesn't even call it adultery because it's not as if Bathsheba was making a choice. When the king made a request, when the king said he wanted something, you have no choice but to obey. David calls Bathsheba in, has sexual relations with her, sends her on her way, she gets pregnant. David says, we got to cover this up. Call her husband home. Her husband was a soldier. His name was Uriah. He says, call her husband home. David says, you've been hanging out with a few thousand men who smell really bad. Why don't you go see your wife? And Uriah said, those soldiers are still fighting. How can I enjoy life here when they're still dying? He refused to go see his wife, and he slept on a mat outside of the king's palace, ready to go back to war. David tried to get him drunk to go sleep with his wife. Uriah wouldn't do it. So David says, I got no choice. He sends Uriah back to the battlefront with a note. Uriah is carrying this note. And here's what the note says. It's to the leaders at the battlefront. Send everyone in the battle, and when Uriah gets far enough up front, pull everyone else back so he gets murdered. This is King David, Solomon's dad, and Bathsheba, Solomon's mom, and the man that she loved. Solomon had a choice what he was going to learn from his dad. Now, In hearing and seeing all of this, there's also many godly traits. For example, when all of this comes out, there's a prophet named Nathan who comes to King David and calls David out on what he's done. And David could have had Nathan killed, but David realizes what I've done is wrong. He repents of it. He goes before God and does everything God asks of him. He repents, and David is known throughout Scripture as a man after God's own heart. Anytime there was a big battle to be had, anytime God wanted to take new territory, and even when he wanted to bring his kingdom back together, David was his man. When Goliath shows up and starts mocking God, David, even as a small boy, is the one who stands up and says, it stops right there. Anytime God needed something done, David was his source. Solomon knew this. Solomon saw these traits, the traits that Solomon chose to put into practice. Dads, men, I would challenge you, learn from the past. Learn from your dads. Learn from other men who spoke into your life. Take the meat and spit out the bones. Learn from it and hold on to the good stuff. Secondly, within your life, set a godly example. Learn from the past, and then now set a godly example. Let's pick up reading at verse 7. Solomon writes to his sons, he says, the beginning of wisdom is this, get wisdom. How's that for deep? If you want wisdom, get wisdom. Though it costs all you have, get understanding. Cherish her, and she will exalt you. Embrace her, and she will honor you. She will give you a garland to grace your head and present you with a glorious crown. Listen, my son, accept what I say, and the years of your life will be many. I love verse 11. I instruct you in the ways of wisdom and lead you along straight paths. Dads, make note of this. As a father, instruct in the ways of wisdom and lead along straight paths. When you walk, your steps will not be hampered. When you run, you will not stumble. Hold on to instruction. Do not let it go. Guard it well, for it is your life. Do not set foot on the path of the wicked or walk in the way of evildoers. Avoid it. Do not travel on it. Turn from it and go on your way. Verse 18, it says, the path of the righteous is like the morning sun, shining even ever brighter till the full light of day. Set a godly example. Show them a wise and a righteous path. Sometimes as your kids get older and they're in your home, they look at you and they begin to think, do you know anything? All they see you as is either oppressive or not understanding or being unwilling to listen. But something amazing happens as your kids begin to move out. They realize you're not completely ignorant. They realize that along the way, you may have learned a thing or two, and as your kids move out, and I'm starting to get to reap some of these benefits now, when they hit a wall, when they need answers or just need someone to talk to, guess who they call? The one who set a godly example. Maybe not an example they agreed with all the time. Maybe an example they didn't appreciate in the home. But as they move out, they start calling for advice. Last night, I was talking to my son and daughter-in-law. They're about to move for graduate school, for medical school, and they're looking for their first house. And they sent us an email. Here's the houses we're looking at. Tell us what you think, because Gina and I have bought and turned over some houses. And they actually wanted input. My challenge to you men and ladies, set a godly example, because when times get tough, they know what to go back to. Right now I'm reading Nick Saban, the coach at Alabama. I'm reading a biography on him. And Coach Saban's dad, they called him Big Nick, was a very strong, very stoic, stern man, but had a heavy influence in Coach Saban's life to the point that now, even though Big Nick died at 46 years old, when Coach Saban was still younger, even now, when Coach Saban puts a book together of plays and he puts quotes in the book, encouraging motivational quotes of all the great coaches he played for or coached with, his dad has more quotes in that book than any other coach. Dad, set a godly example, because your kids are watching. Your neighborhood kids are watching. The kids you teach are watching. The kids you coach are watching. Another example of a father-son, I was playing in a softball league in Florida before moving here, and it was a rough league. We had arrests, like on the field during games kind of league. It was one of those. And we had a game, and this wasn't that odd, but we had a fight break out in the game, and a guy named Jimmy. There was Big Jimmy and Little Jimmy, dad and son. As the fight broke out, the dad went out first and just started swinging. He's aiming for anyone he can hit. As he's fighting, his son, Jimmy, who was probably early 20s, comes out beside him and starts swinging. And as they're fighting, dad is saying to son, "You better not lose a fight." And son's saying, "I won't, Daddy, I won't." Son says to dad, "You better not be getting old." He says, "I'm not getting old, but you better not lose a fight." As they're fighting, and I'm in the dugout, and I'm going psychoanalytical at this point, and I'm like, this is what you're leaving your son. Here's the apex of fatherly example from Big Jimmy to Little Jimmy. This is the godly example that he leaves behind. Dads, we're setting an example in how we act, how we react, how we respond, what we say in public, what we say in private. Set a godly example. That's why I appreciate what verse 11 says. When he says, "I set an example," and he says, lead your kids. Dad, lead your kids. Lead the kids around you with the example. That's one hard piece that for me I've had to come to grips with. Just about every decision I make is a leadership decision. Almost every decision, and some of you say, well, yes, there's the church, there's staff, that's leadership decision. That's part of it. As a husband, the decisions I make are leadership decisions. Gina and I don't go into things with Jack's opinion, Gina's opinion, Jack's choices, Gina's choices. We're Guerra Incorporated. And what we do and what we decide, we do together, moving our family forward. The decisions I make are a leadership example for my kids. Not just for that generation, but for generations to come. Because I know the example I set for them, they'll talk to their kids about when I'm grandpa. Every decision we make is a leadership decision. The financial choices you make are leading your family, are leading your finances. Every decision you make as a Christian is an example where you're a leader to others who may not even be sure about this whole Christianity thing, but they know who you are and they know what you stand for. It's a leadership decision. It's a leadership choice. Younger Jesus followers are watching you. You may have been in this for a while. How do you respond to things? How do you talk to or about people? It's a leadership choice. As a church, we believe God has called us as a leadership example. And case in point with that, in a staff meeting not too long ago, we were talking about how do we give people an opportunity to start conversations. Because we have several in Spring Lake who have said, I'd love to talk to my neighbor, but I don't know how. I'd love to kind of get things rolling. So we thought about a bumper sticker, something simple. Spring Lake loves Jesus. Spring Lake loves Green Bay. We talk about that a lot. It's something foundational. We want people to know. So we thought, what about a bumper sticker? Spring Lake loves Green Bay. And someone on staff said, have you ever seen how some people at Spring Lake drive? Have you ever seen how they drive in our parking lot? We decided against the bumper sticker. Why? Because we're examples. And what we do, we want to set a godly example. Eventually, your kids get old enough, they make their own choices. And that's hard, Mom and Dad, but we got to open our hands and keep our hands up. Because they're going to choose what they worship and what they serve. But they need to know from us what a godly example is. As Joshua said in the scriptures, is for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And if you walk in my house, you know what we stand for. Set a godly example. And remember, as you're setting that example, as a leader, as a dad, as a man, your words mean something. That's the next blank. Your words mean something. Let's begin reading verse 20 through 22. Solomon writes, he says, my son, pay attention to what I say. Turn your ear to my words. Do not let them out of your sight. Keep them within your heart. For they are life to those who find them and health to one's whole body. Your words mean something. Let me ask you a question. I want you to think about this. What was the kindest thing your father ever said to you? What's the kindest thing your father ever said to you? And then here's the next question. What's the harshest thing he ever said to you? And he may have said it in anger. He may have said it because he was tired. He may have said it because he just had a bad day. He may have even apologized later, but you ever notice how those words just stick? Watch our words. We're never going to get it perfect, but we still need to watch our words. Teachers, coaches, watch your words. Watch when and how you say something. And I'll tell you this, I would say one of my big learning curves as a dad, nobody put this in the dad book. One of the things that has stood out to my kids is two simple words that I can say, and it's just, I'm sorry. When I've been wrong, where they don't have to prove themselves right, when I blow it saying, my bad, bad attitude by dad, I missed it. It takes the edge off, and you know what? It's okay for them to see that we're human. Let your words mean something. I'll tell you this too. Be loud and proud when God does something great in life. They hear us complain. They hear about the problems. They hear about the finances. They hear the arguments. How about taking those moments and saying, yay, God, look what God did in this situation. Look how God provided. Your words mean something. They remember that. They hear these things. Make sure you are as clear with praising God as you are in promoting the problems, because your words mean something. The next one, finally, focus and teach what's important. Solomon makes it clear, focus and teach what's important. Verse 23, it says, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows out of it. Everything you do flows out of your heart. It's not this physical pumping organism in your body. It's the inner you. It's who you really are. Everything you do flows out of that. Watch everything that comes out of your heart. Verse 24, keep your mouth free from perversity. Why? Because if perversity comes out of your mouth, guess what's in your heart? If anger comes out of your mouth and your attitude, guess what's in your heart? If bitterness is what continually flows out of you, guess what's in your heart? And your kids know that. And your wife knows that. And your neighbors know that. And the kids in your classroom know that. Guard your heart. Let's read 24. It says, keep your mouth free from perversity. Keep corrupt talk from your lips. Let your eyes look straight ahead. Fix your gaze directly before you. Give careful thought to the paths for your feet, and be steadfast in all your ways. Do not turn to the right or the left. Keep your foot from evil. Solomon is saying to his children, focus, teach what's important. Pass on what's important. And here's a question I would ask, dads, men, ladies, what's important? What's important? If I were to look at your life, what would stand out as important? If I were to ask your kids, what would stand out as important? What's priority? And do we live that way? Do we live with what we say is important in our life matching? I've done a number of funerals. And at almost every funeral, there's usually 2, at most 3 things that will come up in someone's life as what was truly important. Sometimes it's family or friends or hobbies, or places they love to go. I kid you not, one funeral I did, over and over, Wheel of Fortune kept coming up as a priority for their life. Can you imagine passing that on to your kids or your grandkids? Man, my grandparents loved Wheel of Fortune. They just couldn't get enough. Dads, men, ladies, what's important? What are you passing on? Because what Solomon wanted his kids to know, and what we'll see in a moment, what David wanted Solomon to know, was get wisdom in life. That's what was important. As we've looked at throughout this book, get wisdom in finances, get wisdom in relationships, get wisdom in being a godly man or a woman, mom or dad. Get wisdom and stay away from foolishness. Teach that, pass it on. How do we do that? Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Don't lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make your path straight. Get wisdom. Teach. Focus on what's truly important. David knew the importance of the presence of God. When you read the book of Psalms, you see it all through the book. The presence of God. David loved and cherished the presence of God. David was told, no, you don't get to build a residency for me. You don't get to build a temple for me, but your son will. Solomon inherited that love and appreciation, that desire for the presence of God, and he's the one who builds the temple for the people of Israel. Parents, pass on what's important. And here's a final point. None of this happens without knowing your father. None of this can happen if you don't know your daddy. 2 Kings chapter 2 is the last conversation that Solomon has with his dad. David is about to die, and he has a few breaths left in which to clarify some things to his son. And how many of you know when you're about to go and you know it's the last conversation, you're not going to talk football, you're not going to talk weather, you're going to get down to what really counts. I'm just going to read it to you if you want to. If you've turned there, that's great. But 2 Kings chapter 2, beginning at verse 1. It says, when the time drew near for David to die, he gave a charge to Solomon his son. David says, I'm about to go the way of all the earth. He said, so be strong, act like a man, and observe what the Lord your God requires. Walk in obedience to him, and keep his decrees and commands, his laws and regulations as written in the law of Moses. Do this so that you may prosper in all you do and wherever you go, and that the Lord may keep his promise to me. If your descendants watch how they live, and if they walk faithfully before me with all their heart and soul, you will never fail to have a successor on the throne of Israel. God made a promise to David. David's passing this promise on to his son. Solomon passes this promise of wisdom on to his children. What they do with it, it's in their hands. They have to choose. But we cannot know these things. We can't get a hold of them unless we know who our daddy is.